presentation was cancelled this morning due to important reasons. And actually, our session was focusing on several aspects. One presentation was about transition to adulthood and linked to the policies, how policy supporting young people transition to adulthood. It was very interesting presentation, and it's already completed work, and the colleague presented us her book. So I strongly recommend to see this book and probably to use it for your research. Also, we had several presentations related to NEET youth transition from school to work, and those presentations focusing also on rural areas. We are a bit surprised and discussing among us that we have this urban-rural perspective pretty much in our presentations. Also, we have some special age group focused in Luca Koltai presentation. It was focused on age group 25 plus, that it's less addressed by different policy measures. And it's really important work. And this analysis that colleagues from Hungary and other countries, 9 countries in total, carried out, closes the gap between big policy projects like youth guarantee initiatives and smaller projects in sense. And also we had very interesting presentation on young women entrepreneurship in rural areas of Lithuania. So, and also policy recommendation package was also presented for us for the discussion. So probably if I forgot something, please add to it. Mainly, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, hi again. We had a session on inequality and diversity, and discussed that this are actually two sides of the same coin. That on one hand, we very often discuss how to decrease social economic inequalities, but on the other hand, encourage diversity. So we talked about giving voice to different groups in our societies, and it seems that this is easier when people identify with their groups or with their tribes, as it was put, for example, queer populations, but then much more difficult when we talk about people who don't identify, for example, poor people, people in unemployment, and so on. And then there was a lot of talk about about COVID, and now we have data, and we also see how the situation developed after the pandemic. And it seems like COVID increased inequalities in many ways. Also, for example, reduced the gender pay gap in some ways, for example, by reducing flexibility stigma, which often fell on women. But I think what was very evident from our session that even with such a great shock to our system as a COVID pandemic, we see that our social system and our institutions are very much past dependent, and in the longer term, it's really a challenge to bring about long-term and sustainable change. So there was a presentation on social dialogue and, for example, how even in such conditions there was no long-term or sustainable change in encouraging more social dialogue and so on. And it's true for other areas of social policy as well. So I think this is more or less a summary. Thank you very much.
The first presentation in our session was about active aging and what factors determine it, how social policy, leisure, lifestyle factors affect it. The second presentation was about informal care in Lithuania, what policy factors determine it in Europe context, and how local factors determine this, and demographic factors and labor market factors determine this supply of home care producers, and what are policy decisions in order to formalize this informal care. The third presentation was about accessibility of healthcare services, and there were analysis done on two levels. At macro level, it's on municipalities. There was analysis what factors influence, determine the differences in municipalities in patient possibilities to access medicine doctors. And as a conclusion, this statistics is not good. So there are contradictory conclusions can be made from that. So the micro level data was employed, and it showed various factors that determine why people, in which conditions, in which settings, with which characteristics are more able to access medical doctors. And the fourth presentation was about social workers in Latvia, and how what issues they face, what challenges they face in connection with COVID, how these organizations have to change in order to adopt to these new problems, new ways, and what was factors that led them to adopt, and what restricted them from this. So that. Sorry.
Hello to everybody. It is so difficult to say it in so little words what we have done in these 2 hours. But my session that was called Migration and Challenges for the Welfare State was mainly concentrated on Ukrainian issues. And we had Dmitro that talked about labor migration and how this phenomena was economically wise to the Ukraine, that even $13 billion, that its solid share of Ukrainian GDP came back to the Ukraine, and it is like seems very nice, but it is also has this dark side that is like unofficial, illegal, and gray labor is very common among Ukrainian immigrants. So, and we also had Professor Andriy Gorbachuk from Taras Shevchenko University that has talked about internally displaced persons. And he made this kind of survey where they wanted to know whether there is a difference between people that were internally displaced and those who remained in their living place, whether they see differently the situation on the Ukraine future, on the economic situation, and the assessment of political situation. And it was surprising to the researchers that all two groups where there were no difference between them. They imagined that it's going to be much more pessimistic point of view of those internally displaced people, but it was not. And there are a lot of questions why. Maybe there is about the resilience, maybe there is about something else. So a lot of questions, more questions than answers. And we have Agata from Anti-Poverty Network. And she talked about how 344 NGOs in Lithuania tried to help for
80,000 Ukrainian immigrants, yeah? And it was very interesting to know that even 86% of all these NGOs hadn't worked with refugees any other. It was the first time that we worked with refugees, and where there were a lot of new lessons for Lithuanian future. And Agata told us that for her, it is very important to give a big financing to the NGOs in Lithuania so that they can be stronger and even more impactful. And the last presentation was about all the people, like immigrants, from our colleague professor from Turkish University. And she talked about a lot of ways how we can facilitate all the immigrants to communicate when there are barriers of language and other barriers. So I think it was a very nice session. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody, and our session was also very interesting, and we used every minute of it. And we had a very broad geography of presentations. So we started with Finland and Päivi, and we discussed about COVID-19 issues. And we had a very relevant presentation of Päivi. She presented issues of COVID-19 in the context of policy change. Also, in her presentation, she emphasized that, for example, among OECD countries, 11 countries introduced new direct payments in COVID-19 pandemic, and also that expanding pre-pandemic social security and implementation can be interpreted as creating new paths of social policy. And also, one of the main conclusions that these changes can be interpreted as a current social policy lack of some important measures. Also, we had a presentation and discussion about vulnerable groups issues in integration in the labor market in Portugal, and also, it was emphasized the lack of specific training for professional trainings for those people, and the most important challenge, of course, that they had low self-esteem and also faces with poverty and have low education level. So these issues are quite important, I think, and in Lithuania. So we can have some parallels with Portugal even. And also it was very interesting presentation from Kosovo. I think that we know quite a little about this country. So Besnik Fetaho explains about social economic context of Kosovo, and also I see some parallels with Lithuania. For example, quite the same poverty rates in Kosovo, 23%, and population is near 2 million, like in Lithuania, and unemployment rate are quite high. So he just focuses on high inflation issues and poverty rates and other social policy issues in Kosovo. Also, we had presentation about the situation in Poland, about social economy in Poland in large region. And Boguslav Urbaniak presented social cooperative as a place of employment for socially excluded people. And it is an initiative that so far the cooperative has taken in 3 groups of Ukrainian women. So it is very also relevant issues and quite important discussion about social economy. And not only like in the level of country, but also in concrete region. And last, our presentation was about private pension plans in Germany, and one of the main questions was, did the financial crisis have an impact on the purchase of voluntary private pension plans? So the financial crisis has not only influenced the value of retirement savings, but most also for savings and investment behavior itself. So it's also quite important and very interesting conclusion. So that's from me.
Thank you. So our last session was on family policy, and we had presentations from Lithuania, from Latvia, and from Italy. And several of them focused on services to families. What is a new focus that in Lithuania now we experience that there is a need to expand services for postpartum period until children reach 2 years old, that women's mental health should be addressed much more than it was before. And Ilona Tamutienė with Vaida Auglytė from Vytautas Magnus University, we presented now happening or the recent research, interdisciplinary one with health practitioners, which organize a pilot study with visits to home visits, just to improve the woman's mental health and to provide practical support when we face such issues with breastfeeding, for example. And we heard from other countries that there is a need for such services as well. And Vilma Ražauskienė from Lithuanian Center for Social Research, she presented a survey on attitudes, how the share of child care is more becoming traditional after women give birth. So she made a longitudinal study where she noticed that even women have egalitarian attitudes before the giving birth, after giving birth, because of practical issues like wish to stay more at home, to again breastfeed. They see that this traditional share of childcare becomes their practice as well. So there was raised an open-ended question: how can we influence our attitudes? As from social policy, we see that we want to include fathers much more into childcare, but in the practical way, it is quite hard to do. And Maria Letizia Bosoni, Sara Mazzucchelli, and Matteo Mascotelli from Catholic University of Milan, we presented a survey on family centers, which also provide services for families with young children. And from focus group research, we found out that families by themselves perceive these services very positive, and there is a need to give support from such a kind of centers. And the presentation from Vera Komarova from Latvia University, Daugavpils University, and Riga Strantic University, she with colleagues presented a new way to look to our fertility rates. She introduced economical model which can be can be perceived as similar, that we see fertility rates coming up and down, and there are some similarities with economical waves or economical cycles, which we see when we face economical crisis and again grow up and so on. But the main difference is that and in many countries, we see a trend of decline in the fertility rate, and social policy goals, which are set in different strategies in Lithuania as well, usually are too optimistic. For example, Latvia said that we want to achieve 1,77 the fertility rate, and from their calculations, it is not possible, or it's not a realistic goal to achieve. So we discussed what can compare economical cycles with fertility rates prognosis or not. And because of shortage of time, actually, we couldn't explore much more. But what is the new trend, that actually in the family policy, we began to see that the services for new formed families are of a big need, and we have to expand them from the giving birth to further periods of life. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for summarizing. I would like to thank all the attendants and the organizing committee. The meeting is finished. I hope we will see each other at the next events.